Yeah, wherever you're comfortable.
Oh, hello.
What I want to ask you about, what we're going to talk about today is spiraling. I want to know what that means to you. So,
Yeah, for me, spiraling is just like my brain doing this equation, and I don't even do math, and it's not math. It's just different scenarios, and I'm just putting them all together, doing an equation, and then I don't have an answer. Earlier today, I was trying to think of anarchy and empathy. Anarchy is about love and empathy. Like that's the core. And it's interesting how it's anarchy has been made to be something so scary, so violent, so anti what it is. It takes out the main core, which is empathy. But then also I learned also anarchy and empathy. You can have empathy without like, you can do it without, see, this is where I get stuck, where I'm like, it's in my head and I'm like, what is the combination that is actually what I'm thinking? That I get stuck. That's the spiral where it's like, and so when I'm by myself and I'm not verbalizing it, it's just, sometimes I'll be texting it. You can maybe see it in our text messages when I'll text you an idea and I'm like, wait, no. And then I'll text you something else and like, wait, no. It's like the same thing where it's like, I feels like something's missing. I'm like, is that piece what people aren't understanding? Because some people think of empathy as over. I think that some people think that it's more mushy gushy than it is. It's not as mushy gushy as people think it is.
right.
It is that, and so that anarchy idea is the opposite of mushy gushy. It's seen as violent and dangerous. Mm-hmm. Where's the happy medium so that people can understand? Mm-hmm. That's the equation I was trying to figure out of these people that are not understanding when we talk about empathy, mm-hmm. but then they'll understand other stuff, which makes sense too. Where's the happy medium so that we can get people who are anti-anarchy because of their misconceptions to understand, and then people who are anti-empathy to understand empathy is not mushy-gushy. It must not be anarchy or empathy, and maybe it's another word in between. I don't even know. That's the math equation. I was like, I don't have the answer. I was spiraled because it's like you can go so many different directions.
Yeah, you made me think of a lot of things. One thing my friend Megan, who's a really good friend of mine, said to me once is, you're a really compassionate person. And so no one ever said that to me, and it stuck with me and still sticks with me today. And that word resonates kind of to me. And what you're discussing outside about empathy is like, it seems like to me compassion is people being compassionate of each other.
But I think even that might have too much emotion. They're more about like fact. And so maybe they even have a word. And that's why they always say like individualistic versus whatever I don't know what the other word that they use instead of individualistic. But they use like these like terms that are like black and white. But then when they use those, people don't get it.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's do this.
So it's like how you take the emotion out, leave it black and white. And the reason they take the emotion out, I think, is so that it can't get mixed up in the future.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to look up the word compassion.
Based on like interpretation.
I want to look this word up for a second. So the definition, and I mean, because I'm familiar. I think a lot of the people that I interact with see themselves as like, well, we're logical, we're practical, mm-hmm. we're logical, right? So it has forced me through life to understand how to interpret things in their language, and so it's, to me, the definition of compassionate is feeling or showing sympathy and concern for others, just showing concern. And those are acts of compassion. When these are acts of compassion that people are expressing, like, oh, let me show that I have concern for, the homeless people who have no fire, and I'll give them wood. And that's an act of compassion. Empathy, I'm just going to express how I use the word. And it maybe, we all have different ways of looking at things, but maybe it could help you in talking to them. I'm really, in that sense, I just go to the traditional terms, and it's the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. And so, like, I took a nonviolent communication class, and the whole idea was to teach empathy. And I disagreed. I don't think that you can teach empathy, right? And I've since grown to understand that it can be taught. My therapist, she's like, I think you can too. And so I try to be a little more open-minded. But for me, empathy is very visceral, meaning, like, if I walk into a room and people are sad, I'm going to feel sadness inside of me. And the ways that they try to teach it in these classes, for example, when they're teaching empathy, is they try to get the person to think about what the other person's experience is like, right? So that would be like, I don't know, like right now, being empathetic would be like me trying to imagine what your experience is like right now. And in my mind, I'd be like, okay, so I'm a new person. So she's feeling like, okay, now I'm talking to a new person. And see, there's these little observations that I make too, like your face, you start to light up for a minute. So then that tells me, like, way I'm reading that, the emotional intelligence quotient, which we really have a problem with in our society today. But I see your reaction. I'm like, okay, so that she feels good, because that's how I interpret a smile, like a good feeling, right? And there's a lot of people who fake smiles and stuff like that. But these are little cues, and so, like, I watch your body language. Right now, you're like, you're kind of like this, but you're looking attentively, like you're really interested in what I'm saying, right? Versus if you were just like, then my empathy would be, she's not interested in what you have to say. A lot of people have a hard time with that, and that's, a guy told me that a couple years ago. You have really good emotional intelligence, right? And that was interesting. I knew that about myself, but what I hadn't thought about is that a lot of people lack emotional intelligence, right? And that causes a lot of misunderstanding, right? So, and the people who think they're very logical, because in society, this patriarchal society, this system that we've been, maintaining for all these years, is based on a sort of, I would call more left brain, like, rationale of, like, facts and concrete things, but not emotional. Like, people have written emotion out of the equation for a long time. We've denied our emotional self, the feminine aspect of who we are. We have denied that. And so this is also the reason why it's this explosion, right? Of, if you think about it, if you're angry, right, that's an emotion, and you keep pushing it down, eventually you just explode. And in society today, what I see is that that feminine has been suppressed so much in us as a species that now it's exploding. It's like, hear me, I'm a part of this too, right? But a lot of people are having a hard time because they don't have the emotional intelligence to even understand feelings. Most of the time, people have a hard time being empathetic of others, of understanding another person's emotions, because they don't even understand their own emotions. That's what I've observed, right? I've been lucky and fortunate because I've had so much therapy, and I've been forced, at a very young age, to sit down and sit with my feelings and think, how do you feel about this? Why did you do this thing? Why did you do that thing? What are the emotions? Most people don't have to do that in life. They can just go to school, follow all the rules, get a job, make money, and like they coast on by. And some of those people can be very rich, materially, from just that standpoint. But that has caused this imbalance in society where we, as a species, lack emotional intelligence, which we need to be empathetic in the first place. So the empathy for me, and just in this situation, is I'm reading your face as we're talking. I'm there's the topic that's on the surface that we're talking about, but I'm also, my brain is observing you and cues, like the nod of your head says she's following along. You know what I mean? This is the emotional intelligent quotient. I think that's the test. There's an intellectual quotient, which is IQ test, and there's EQ, which is emotional quotient. People have really low emotional intelligence. You have a very high emotional intelligence. So what translates to spirit, to a connection with spirit, that you is also in a more like clinical, academic, psychological terminology, is considered emotional intelligence. Basically, that's the spirit, is the emotional aspect of it. So for the left brain people who are like, the spirit thing sounds hokey and supernatural to me, unrealistic. It's like, well, emotion then. How about that? Do you see the emotional aspect of the situation? Let's take the current situation with the police violence, for example. Like, to me, what it seems to me, only empathetic, emotional, spiritual understanding is you have a situation where the police stop someone, and on one side, this guy has been conditioned his whole life to look at this person as dangerous and threatening. So he's on high alert. He's in the fear, fight or flight response. On the other side, the other guy has been conditioned his whole life to see the other guy as a threat. And so he's in the fight or flight response. And you have these two people who are approaching this situation with fear, with fight or flight. They're already in that state of mind. It just takes a little drop of a pin or something before someone is going to react to that situation, right? And so that's the real issue, and as far as the racial aspect, well, yeah, a lot of those conditioning fears that, let's say, the white officer has for the black suspect is because of racist ideas in his community or wherever he's from. Is like, you should be afraid of black people, they're dangerous, you're dangerous. So that's kind of causing him to have this fear that's unnatural. But we're getting all caught up in this political, the mental, the intellectual aspect of things, and that's what's making it hard for people to just be empathetic, and I've grown up in most of my life I spent in a small sort of bigot town. There's a lot of that. It's southern. It's where Dorchester County, where Harriet Tubman is from. That's where I'm from, right? So it has that history. But there's certain situations that turn out okay if just the two individuals have empathy. People can see past, their ignorance, so to speak, right? It's just connecting. And just some people don't have the emotional quotient. They don't have that intelligence. And I ideally, with Empath of the Empire, would like to teach people, to help people tap in and see, because I think if they're saying they can teach people empathy, then, and if they're correct, then I have to assume with my brain that it must be something that a person already has, right? And so let's just reveal it to them, right? That's what I tried to do with that last podcast with everyone as an empath, because to some degree we're all affected by each other. We cannot help but be, because believe it or not, we're all one species, like a tree, right? There's one apple on this side, there's one apple on this side, and they were like, oh, you're green and I'm red, like fuck you, but we're apples from the same tree, so we are connected. Whatever happens to this tree, if it doesn't get water, then we both starve. If it does get water, then we both thrive, right? But this is illusion of being separate, like you're different than me, right? Empathy is what connects us, the spirit, and that is our emotion. We're all tied together emotionally. When I walk in a room with people and they're sad and I can feel that sadness, I'm aware of it because I have had the training to understand my own emotions, so that I know, okay, I wasn't sad when I walked into this room, so this is not my sadness. Meanwhile, a lot of people who don't have the emotional intelligence to understand others, also don't have the emotional intelligence to understand themselves. So they will be in that room and they will feel this sense of sadness. It will affect them in some way, but they can't understand why. And what most people will do is attach it to whatever they're thinking. They'll think, maybe they're thinking about their bills maybe they're thinking about their bills, and they walk in a room, right, and everyone is in a state of fear, for example, and you're thinking about your bills, and suddenly you start feeling fearful, right? You're like, I must need to be worried about something. Maybe things are in jeopardy. I need to worry about that. And that's what happens, like an anxiety attack. You have a thought, it sparks some fear within you. And then that emotion of fear affects your thought. And so it's in your thoughts are like, oh, well, then I should be afraid because I feel afraid, right? And then that thought makes you more afraid. And then your brain is like a computer. Your conscious mind is like the search engine, and your unconscious mind is like the internet, basically. So once you have this idea in it, your unconscious mind is going to find reasons to validate your idea. That's how our ego works, right? So maybe it seems like I'm going off on a bit of a tangent, but we don't have emotional intelligence to the degree that we need to have it in our society. And so it's causing all this discord amongst everyone. I guess in another way, I feel lucky and grateful because of my open mind, and because I grew up isolated from everyone. I kind of entered the world and everyone was kind of somewhat equal, right? In a way, like everyone was the same. I mean, I had things that I might have been attracted to or repelled by, but so I end up with friends who are hard leftists, and I end up with friends who are hard right. And so the only way that I connect with people is through the emotion. That's all I have, because I didn't know anything about politics. I didn't grow up around politics. I didn't understand these other religions. I didn't understand these other belief systems. I didn't have exposure to them. So the only way I could relate to people is through emotion. And so I want to be around, maybe I feel good. I want to be around people who feel good, right? And maybe these people don't like each other, but they feel good for some reason. But to me, they're all connected by the emotion, the spirit part of it, right? So, a lot of reason that people don't even look at the emotional aspect is because most people probably have a lot of pain, right? So, but if I'm numbing myself, if I'm numbing my own feelings, like how else am I going to treat everyone else? But the same way, if I disregard my own feelings, dismiss my own feelings, I become a person who dismisses feelings, and then I dismiss the feelings of others. So a lot of this division I see, with different people is, they don't even want to look at their own feelings. They don't want to start feeling, right? Because then it's going to bring up a lot of personal pain with them. But that can only go on for so long. The earth is conscious. We're all living beings. We all know we can't repress our emotions for very long, and now it's exploding, right? So I think to think about what you were saying earlier about the connection of anarchy and empathy, I think I would use the word compassion. I'd be like, hey, we just need to be more compassionate with each other. Empathy has these weird, different definitions that I've noticed especially since I've been out west. But really, it's just reading other people and using your emotional intelligence in life. That's all it is. But a lot of people don't have emotional intelligence, so they don't understand empathy. That's really what it comes down to. And I think the main reason that they don't understand, is that they just don't understand their own emotions because they run from their own emotions. There's a lot of hurt people. That used to be a thing. Hurt people are the ones that hurt people. And that's why, like, they dismiss their own feelings.
There's a lot that I wanted to.
Yeah, go for it. You were a really good listener, and I just went on a rant.
Well, no, I love it. Like, so the first thing when I saw at my old job, some of my bosses would have emotional intelligence book.
Nice.
But they themselves were not emotionally intelligent. So I was like, are you not clicking with the book? Like, did you not read it? Like, what are you missing?
Right.
And I think that, like, then it made me question, because I still never read the book, but it made me question emotional intelligence.
Right. Because you're like,
why don't people have it? Society brainwashing? Is it something we have that we are brainwashed out of? Like, and that made me think, is emotional intelligence humanness? But, like, they're putting this word emotional intelligence, but being human, that could be very much just be, like, it could be like no title at all. It could be our natural human state. Right. But because of society, we have to come up with these words like emotional intelligence.
That's the masculine aspect.
Right. Yes.
That's all it is.
And so that's what made me think, like, it's definitely society. Like, and then it's like, we really don't know the capabilities of humans, you know? And so, and then the other thing that I was thinking of, is, it was good. Okay. So you were talking about how people don't understand themselves. And I think, and actually I will say from my own experience, from my personal experience, I'm unable to process my emotions because I wasn't able to properly reflect as a child and properly have self-agency as a child. If you're able to properly reflect, like, I mean, you know, and Confucius had issues with stuff. You know, nobody's perfect. Nobody has the answers. I think that's the problem.
We're growing.
It's like Confucius saying that he had, like, the answers, you know, but really he had some good answers with that reflection idea. So it's like that idea of, like, you know, reflection being the best way, like I forgot the exact quote, but reflection being reflection being a good direction towards wisdom. And, you know, I think with wisdom comes peace, because you're able to be wise and, you know, not let things rule over you and stuff. And I'm learning. You would think as I get older, I get more wise, but I mean, I'm in a way more chaotic state right now than I was younger. But I think that it's just because I'm just need to be here for right now. So I'm not like wise yet. So I'm still in this chaotic fucking zone of, like, what the fuck.
Is that the spiraling part you mean?
Yeah, it feels like spiraling, just because it's like you keep going back to these ideas and you go away from them, you spin around them with a different verbs, different you know, different ways, and I'm like, well, I don't have the answer still.
Can I ask you a question? Stop you for a second. What part of, okay, so it's gonna tie, because that's the point of this podcast, spiraling. So you're making this spiral, right? People can't see, but I'm doing it with my hand, a circle. And when you're going through this process, what makes you think that it's wrong? Is it because it feels like I don't have any control?
It is the urge to kill myself.
Okay. So what do you think?
That answer is kind of like,
no, it's, there's no, I mean,
okay.
we're understanding. We're trying to understand this, right? That's what we're making a spiral now around understanding spiral, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the urge to kill myself.
Because it's a lot.
Is it because it's overwhelming?
And it doesn't stop because it's a spiral. It's like it doesn't stop.
Mm-hmm.
I can't even say it's a circle because it just spirals because it keeps going. It doesn't go in the same place, but it's always spinning and it's always connected together and it's just always spinning.
And does it feel like you're losing control?
Yeah. And
then that part is the part that's overwhelming. You're like, oh, I just want to die. I can't handle this.
Yeah.
It's scary.
And it feels like for one, it's out of my control because it's so big, right? It's the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a lot.
I can't take the world on.
And it's not your sole responsibility either,
Right. But then like being a part of the world. So my human experience is negatively affected by everybody else's human experience. So I can't I feel like what is the point of being alive? Because I'm not even able to experience being a human because I am experiencing being a human, but people are making me out to be the crazy person because I'm upset at very rational things that should be humanistic. Like it should be. And after having so many conversations with so many different people,
mm-hmm.
people, I don't understand why no one exactly feels it the way I do. And I think that, it might be because I did have a lot of self-agency as a child and I fought for self-agency it might be spirit. And people might say that might be, that gets into a whole nother topic, which, some people may not believe in spiritual stuff, but we're able to have our different beliefs and we're able to be different types of humans. I think that we might be different types of humans, but I feel like there's a underlying humanness that we should, but I don't know. Now I'm like, are there but we're not, but it's like, is DNA the only thing? Like, what if there's something else that separates us spiritually, like intergalactically? Like, I don't really know.
Right.
And it's like, you would like,
it's almost like which questions are the ones worth asking.
Right.
I think I have an idea. Spiraling seems to be when a person, when is trying to understand something, but they lose the point, the topic.
Yeah.
Really. That's what I'm just, as I listen to you, now as you're speaking out to me, it's like we started off, we were talking about spiraling, and then we get off track, and then we get to this another question, and then it triggers more and more questions and these questions, right? And so it's like hard to stay on the point of the original question, the original thought. I think that's something else my ex used to say. What's the original thought?
Mm-hmm.
And she was the other person who told me about it. She's, oh, we're spiraling. It's the original thought.
I think you're right.
And then what happens is all these other things. And what I was telling you about the relationship between the mind and the body, basically the emotion and the mental aspect. What happens is once we lose the original thought, that's kind of scary. And so now the body is feeling afraid, and so now this fear is affecting the thinking process too. And so now it creates this circle where, it causes you like, oh, I feel like I'm losing control. And you are losing control. You're only losing control of the original thought.
Yeah, and that's why. So I've always been wanting to keep my friends connected so that I can keep my story full and with full context.
What do you mean
Because,
story?
like, keep the dots connected.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I am spiraling, I do miss gaps in the dots, but eventually they're all connected, and they had to be in that order for a reason when I look back. And I'm like, what the fuck? Why couldn't I just come up with the answer in the first place? Or like with my friends when I'm talking, or how I used to do it, if I'll tell one friend an idea, I always tell all my friends my ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And then that way I can say, oh, do you remember? And then we can have another conversation about it. And then that's why a lot of people know me as like an interconnecting friend. Like I always like bring together my friends, and we get together and we all tell, like, somebody will be like, oh, remember that one time, like Ashley, and they'll tell it, and then they're like, oh, well, she also told me this part, and then I'll be like, oh shit, I totally forgot. And then we put it together, and then we come up to a conclusion about that scenario, about like it's a whole new perspective on what happened,
So
because we're
like
able to put together the dots.
It seems almost like a form of group therapy.
Yeah.
But the difference is that instead of it being like kind of an intentional group therapy, it's your life.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's cool and all, but that can probably cause you to be just sort of scattered, and there's like pieces of you over here, pieces of you over there. So that creates these gaps, right? Because you need this other person to participate in your train of thought. In your
Which is frustrating. I'm like, why can't I just remember it myself?
Well, it's because you're going at it with other people. You're giving them pieces. How was another way? Oh, so as an artist, right? Like, I get inspired by things around me, right? And then I create a piece of art based on the thing that I'm inspired by. So I'm giving feedback to the original thing that inspired me, which could have been another person. If you're having these communications with other people, right, and you're sharing these thoughts and ideas, is everyone just as open as you, right? If they're not, if some people are holding back something, then you're missing a piece. That's another gap, right? But they have a part of you. They have parts of your story. You don't have parts of their story. So you don't know what thought came up in their mind to influence you to say the next thing, right? That's with the stream of consciousness. It's a stream of consciousness. I guess that's what I do. I do lots of stream of consciousness. And so I'm talking to you, and it all comes. There's no gaps. There's no gaps, so there's no confusion, right? But like right now, technically, there's a gap because you're listening, but you're having thoughts, right? I'm not getting that feedback right now.
I'm listening. I'm just thinking, holy shit. I've never heard it worded sense? Like that, but that makes sense. And that that makes sense.
Yeah. And even now, the sense that you're making of it, I don't know what that is.
Well, I'm thinking of reflection.
Only you have it. Yeah.
I'm thinking of,
that's cool. Go ahead.
Yeah. I'm thinking of reflection. That makes sense because of reflection. If I'm not reflecting because I am putting it out. You're right. I'm putting it out all the time. I'm not reflecting. And I don't know. Yeah, I don't know why I don't reflect, but
I mean, I don't think that most people reflect. I mean, that's kind of what we're saying.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? We don't. Like, I literally, yeah. When I was a teen, I would do something self-destructive, for example, and they'd be like, "Go to your room and think about what you did," and I was forced to reflect. But I don't think most people are forced to reflect in their childhood, and that's where we develop, our first tools and our first our modus operandi, as they say in psychology. Like, that's where we develop those things. And if we go through our life as a child and we're never sort of made to reflect, then it's not a behavior that we're going to have as an adult. And individualism is a big thing, you know, but we have all these codependent relationships with people and with our mind. You're getting people to reflect back to you, right?
Right. And I'm also thinking of...
It gives away your power to some degree.
It does. It just totally... And that's why I've always seen as a mockery, because maybe it's not always why I am kind of silly, but also the only time I really reflected as a kid was when I was in trouble because I was on punishment.
So do you think that could, I'm just theory, just when you say that makes me think that could cause a like negative
that's the
association
only time
with
I
it.
reflect. Actually, now I want to cry.
It's okay to cry.
That's almost the only time I reflect, and I'm always like, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. I'm always down on myself, and I'm always talking about I'm always reflecting on my actions towards others, even though I feel like I'm actually pretty nice, but I've always,
you are very nice.
Everybody has to reflect still, you know, but all I do is reflect on myself, my bad behaviors, but I never reflect on myself as myself. I never like, as far as good and bad, this good and bad shit, like when stuff can and should be just is, you know? I never really was encouraged to reflect as just is. Like, even spending time with family, you know, like we would, you know, watch TV and eat dinner, or when we did eat at the dinner table, sometimes we wouldn't really talk, or like, I guess that's not reflection, but that's not reflection.
In a collective way, like you were saying with the group message.
Exactly. Like reflection wasn't really in my home, except for my mom wanted me to always be better. Yeah. Because she missed, you know, she didn't have opportunities. Or my dad wanted me to be better too, because he missed out on opportunities. I don't know if he missed out on opportunities. He took an opportunity, but that opportunity, I feel like, should not be an opportunity. It's not. I don't know, even want to use the word opportunity. You know.
But see, now I'm seeing just in this conversation here, just like now, and I'm wondering how much of it is affected by the spiraling. Like, because even now, as you're talking to me, it goes. Yeah, it's hard to stay on the path. Right. It's hard to stay on the course. So, I know another trick that's therapists gave me is like, make the connections, right? Okay, so we would in group therapy or in one-on-one therapy, I walk back. Well, how did I get to here? And then I track it back to, well, I got to that thought because of this thought, because of this thought, because of this thought, just to keep myself grounded in myself, you know. It's like, now you were going on, starting to talk about your father and his things. And
I've been spiraling all day where I'm like, that's kind of the...
It seems like the spiraling, what I'm getting now is like, it comes from a couple things. Maybe having a negative association with self-reflection can cause that, or be a part of it. And, I think, you know, actually, here's something else. I'm gonna segue again for a second, but it connects. It's connected. Maybe a year ago, about 7-8 months to a year ago, I was having disturbing thoughts, right? Like, I was having thoughts that, like, razors were slicing into my eye. Like, it would just happen randomly, and it was like, what? I don't want to feel like, this is not a thought I want to have. It's really disturbing. And I started doing some research on disturbing thoughts, and I didn't really find anything, you know, what I was looking for. But the thought came to me, what if it's a distraction? What if I thought of something, maybe traumatic, maybe something traumatic came up in my you know, stream of consciousness, because this stream of consciousness is always running, right? And something happens. Like maybe I smell a shampoo that reminds me of a time when something bad happened to me, right? And so then I start having I have this association, because associations are a big part of this. That's why it's important to realize how it connects. But if I have a thought and it makes me think of something or puts me in a place that I don't want to be in, a good way to get me off of that track would be imagining razors slicing my eyes, right? These disturbing thoughts would, if they come in, to break up what I'm thinking about, to take me away from what it is I'm thinking about. I started thinking about that and they start to go away, because I was like, what thought happens first before I have this disturbing thought? What thought's happening before you start to spiral? If you could keep track of that, I would say try to figure out what things happen. Like, okay, before I started spiraling, I was thinking about this, and then just, see what they are. That would be interesting, right? Like maybe that's something to try. I don't know.
I think so.
It's like you're trying to figure out something, is what just me observing you as you talk to me. It's like you're trying to figure out the answer to something. Mm-hmm. That's what I'm seeing.
I'm trying to figure out my role in this human experience, and where in society does somebody like me fit in? I can't find a space.
What do you want to do?
I don't know. I just want...
That's what I would reflect on. Yeah. What do you want to do?
I want to make an impact and change people.
Okay, so you take that and go...
Or not change people. Sorry. Okay. I want to make an impact.
You want to make an impact. Okay, so that's the first... Okay, we got that far. Then the next part is, what ways could I make an impact? You know what I mean? Because the thing is, there's nothing wrong with the spiral. It's supposed to happen. Carl Jung talked about this thing called circular ambulation. I just learned that term maybe 2 years ago. And what he says is, in this path, and it's kind of what the point of these labyrinths are that you see in like a lot of Eastern religions, and they say, oh, it's to enlightenment. Here's what the enlightenment is finding what you're to do. You know what I mean? That's enlightenment, when you find what your role is in this world and how you do make your impact. It's the same for everyone, right? That's enlightenment. And so the spiral, the circular ambulation, as Carl Jung calls it, is this idea that as you go around the circle of life, as you're making these spirals, you come back to this thing here. You see reoccurring themes, right? Mine was really easy for me. Like, I know the impact that I'm supposed to make has to do with making music, doing this conversations on podcasts, and writing. Because all throughout my life, and as I went through all the different phases, those are the things that I was always drawn to, right? And so it seems like to people, I think in a linear fashion, it seems like we find an interest in something and then we lose interest. Or we try this thing and we fail at it, and then we go along, and then maybe we try it again later. You are supposed to keep trying at it. That thing keeps coming back to you because it's tied to who you are. And that will be your enlightenment once you realize that purpose, that thing you're supposed to do that's impactful to society. And there's all these different religious, spiritual things that are talking about enlightenment and all this, like this Zen and all this. Like, it's all being misrepresented. The impact, the thing that you want to be, live your full human experience, your place in connection with all of us. That's your enlightenment. That's what you should find. And once you find that, something else will come, right? It'll grow from there. But that's the main priority right now. The first, find that. And we live in a society where people don't do that. They're not taught to do that, where they're conditioned to just go work and slave for the machine, right? And that's fine, but that's not people living their purpose, right? It's just following rules. But if you want to reach enlightenment and you want to be your full highest self, you have to figure out what is it that you are to do. I'm careful about the word intended, but what you are, what your role is, what is the way that you have the impact. So when you reflect, spiral the fuck out, just keep spiraling. Remember, the point is to figure out what your purpose is, not to get spiral out on why like this person over here is this way, or why these people seem like they're stupid and they don't get this thing, or that's not your purpose. That's for them to figure out. That's their issues to figure out. Your only priority in this whole world is to figure out who you are and what it is that you are here to do for society, to serve society. What is your spot?
Yeah. Well, it gets difficult because I have to make that definition or that role myself, it seems. Because
let's look at the things that you're drawn to. Just in your spiral, I notice when you go spiraling, you get caught up in like other people's problems. Mm-hmm. That seems to think. So now that's a hint to me that like, okay, so whatever faith is supposed to do is tied to helping people with their problems. So now you have more of a direction, So now the spiral gets tighter, and now the loops are going to be less out there, because now okay, now how can I help people? And then you think about, maybe you could think about like, which ways would I help people? Which ways am I drawn to try to help them now? And it seems like one thing is you want people to understand empathy and spirituality. So now these are all clues to what it is that you're trying to figure out that you are to do. And so, but when you spiral, it's not, it may seem like you're going off on a tangent, but try to understand how that tangent relates to the original thought, which is how can I help the world? That's the thought.
Yeah. And in this society, people in history, storytelling verbally was, in history, but then also once they got it in the written form. Now I'm spiraling because I'm like going,
because you're talking about, you start spiraling about history and the story. Like I say, hey, maybe it's your story to tell, and then you go to, historically there's this, and people were silenced, and there was the oral word, and it's like, what the hell does that have to do with you? You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
So I think maybe part of the spiral is running away from ourselves.
Yeah.
That seems to be
maybe.
Yeah, it's like we're losing control because we're running away from ourselves.
Yeah. It's like in my head, I'm like,
you're going everywhere but except to you. Understanding
what other people are feeling.
You know how a person has understanding of other people's feeling? I'm making myself as authority here, right? Well, it's empath of the empire, so I'm giving myself that authority for this podcast. Understanding your own feelings.
Yeah.
If you're running from your own feelings, then you're not gonna understand other people. You're not gonna have true empathy for them, because you have to have it for yourself first. That's where that colloquial expression, you can't love others until you learn to love yourself, that's where it comes from. So if you want to spread empathy, you have to start by giving yourself empathy.
Damn.
And not escaping in spirals on other people's things, because you still have your own to solve. If you don't really know what you're supposed to do to impact the world, then you have to figure that out first before you start trying to impact the world. You gotta know who you are. You got to find out who you are. You got to get to the core of you and have empathy for you. And then it naturally just radiates. You don't even have to try. Yeah. You just walk in the room and people feel it. When you have this love for yourself and you understand and you're at peace with yourself, to be at peace with yourself, you have to go through some chaos with yourself too. You have to go through that. A lot of people don't get it because they don't want to go through the pain part, but you have to go through the pain part too. to get there to the root. But once you have that, you will just be a living example of empathy. It will naturally happen. You won't even have to try, but you have to give that to yourself.
Wow. I'm so close. My brain.
What's happening now?
Spiral.